All right, welcome back to the channel. We are going to be talking about ESIs today. So ESIs have a base function of introverted ethics and a creative function of extroverted sensation. So this is a very heavily sensing oriented type. So keep that in mind. That is pretty important to note. This individual with introverted ethics as their base function is going to be very, very aware of their visceral attitudes toward things. I mean, this could be down to suggestions. It could be people. Generally, an introverted ethics type is going to be focused on relationships. But this extends beyond just relationships with one person or another. This also has to do with their visceral relationship to things, to an experience, just whatever the case may be. But in particular with the ESI, it's going to be they're going to be focused on like their sensations, right? So rather than how they feel about some abstract idea or how they feel about some principle, it's going to be a lot more about how they feel towards something they've experienced. It could be towards something that like a food or a smell. Or generally, because they have such an emphasis and focus or awareness of their sensory environment, they also have a very visceral awareness of how they feel towards it. And so that's something you're going to see a lot from them. If you're trying to determine someone's type and they speak a lot about like how they feel or just outright reject certain things, if they're just like, man, like fuck this, fuck that, like they clearly know how they feel, then that's a pretty good indication that you're seeing a lot of introverted ethics. Especially if you ask them for rationale and they give, it's not that they can't give rationale, but you're going to be able to tell that it's a lot more with how it has a lot more to do with how they feel. And so that's pretty much front and center because it is a introvert ethics type. But I need to get into these redeeming qualities because there are a lot of them. Their relationships are really important to them. They are very likely to stand by their friends. They're going to be, for the people that they do care about, they're probably going to be very protective. May even feel the need to like a sense of responsibility to be more honest with someone, even when they don't want to be or they don't want to hurt that person. They'll probably still do it just because they know how like that person's important to them and they don't want to do them wrong by not acting, right? And so that's another aspect of this type, right? You see that creative SC. They're going to be forceful when they have to be. These aren't bullshitters that we're talking about here, right? But those bonds and those connections or their relationships are going to be very important to them, and you're going to see that in the way that they act. They're a little rough around the edges, but they're ultimately going to watch out for their friends, and that's going to be a big part. That's going to be a big part of who they are. So the next thing I want to get into with this type, we'll go ahead and cover FE, ignoring. They're not that expressive. It's not that they don't have the capacity to be expressive. It's just that they generally don't see it as authentic, I suppose you could say. They're much more likely to want to honor their own feelings about things, and so keeping up with some emotional atmosphere or whatever the case, they're more likely to express exactly how they feel despite how it may affect other people, despite how it may affect the group atmosphere. Not that they can't, sort of play that role if they need to, but generally they're going to want to stick to how they feel about things. So this is someone that is not incapable when it comes to extroverted ethics or FE, but generally they're going to be more focused on their own personal feelings about things, and may even feel those visceral feelings very strongly. This is a 4-dimensional, 3-dimensional sensation type. So moving on to the interaction of SC and NI with one another. In fact, I'm going to cover SI as well. So the demonstrative function for this type, or what I like to call the informative function, is introverted sensation. It's 4-dimensional. They're very aware of their environment. They're very aware of details. Their focus, they're ultimately translating that awareness of the dynamics of the spatial environment into their application of force in that environment. So, if we took a SI valuing type, they would have a sense of the dynamic field or relationships between objects in space, right? So, let's say we're talking about people for a moment here, right? An SI valuing type would see how how their being social in the environment may be affecting other people and things like that, and ultimately trying to create some kind of group harmony. But because this is a type that is very aware of the dynamics of the environment, but is ultimately focused on how they apply force in it, what you see, and this is both for LSI and ESI, is a greater amount of precision in the way that they apply force. Think of the SLE or the SCE, who have that boisterous, impactful presence, especially SLE, right? Because they have that valued FE. For the ESI and the LSI, they're not ignoring the SI, right? They're focused on applying force, but they're aware of those dynamics, and it takes up quite a bit of their perception. So what tends to happen is they tend to focus on the desired result, NI in this case, and how they can apply force to get that desired result. And so generally, they do it without disrupting the environment. Those SE bases can have a way of just having so much presence that it can just disrupt everything that's going on, right? The flow, the dynamic of an environment. But with ESI and LSI, they have a way of getting what they want and executing in a spatial environment without disrupting the overall harmony of it. And that's what makes them so fascinating to watch. In fact, I think that LSIs and ESIs stand out so much for this reason. To me, it's almost obvious when someone is this type, just because of that careful, deliberate application of force. It's very precise, and it's very nonchalant. In the sense that they just seem like they've got it under control, and they're not overdoing it. It's very nonchalant for this type. So, as for how it applies specifically to the ESI, it's mostly going to relate to people or how they feel about certain things. They may apply force so that they don't have to deal with certain things in their environment. This is you got to think ESI is going to be more in tune with their own feelings about things, and so this is a very personal type. This is about them and how they feel, or how the people that they care about feel, and so the things that they do and the way that they apply force are going to relate to those things overall. So it's not going to be about adhering to some system or something like that. It's probably going to be to enforce their own will of how they want their environment to be. And as well as applying force in regards to defending and protecting their friends. That is a big point, and I've said it a lot already, but I just think it's so important to emphasize that, if you have an ESI friend, they're going to be very loyal and protective. And I really don't know how I can emphasize that enough, because it's a huge part of who they are. So yeah, that's. But they're also going to be pretty rough with people they don't care about. That's another thing. When it comes to people that are outside of their circle, they're probably going to roast them. Not in the sense that they're making a scene or that they're doing it for a crowd, but more so that they're not going to hold back. I have an ESI friend, and he with strangers or people he does not know, he does not hold back. And I'm not saying that all ESIs are this way. I think some can practice a lot more restraint, but generally, because they just don't care about those people because they're not important to them, they'll probably just not hold back and roast them pretty bad. So yeah, that's another aspect of this type. And moving on past that. So this is a TE suggestive type, and so they're going to want to receive as much helpful data as they can. They're looking for someone to be able to provide them with more effective or efficient ways of doing things. And in particular, this type is focused on developing their sense of long-term trajectory or path. Working towards something over time. But they're going to struggle a lot more with the how-to, the application. And so they're going to be looking for someone to be giving them that information. That way they'll have a sense of a solid plan, a direction, and a wealth of information that they can use to navigate that plan and to adjust to the world around them. So that's something that you're going to see with this type as well. They're also going to be, you think about it like this as well. This type is very volative, right? They're focused on how they feel about things. And so you bring in a TE base that has that objective take on everything, right? This person's going to ground them in a sense outside of how they feel about things. And so, in that sense, the ESI is going to rely on someone who can provide that practical focus, that objective focus that has a lot less to do with their own personal feelings and kind of sets them on track for how they can navigate a situation or a circumstance in the most strategic way possible. I mean, you think about this type has some sense of long-term impact, but it is the mobilizing, and so it's going to vary in terms of use, in terms of how strong it is. And so they may be, so headstrong that it can end up damaging their long-term goals. Maybe not as spontaneous or impulsive as a SE base, but there's still a large margin of error there that they're going to get in their own way. So someone who can keep them grounded in a objective lens and give them useful information or tools to navigate those situations and sort of have a long-term, stick to their long-term goal. That's going to be important for this type. So moving along to polar NE. So this is just not an open-minded person. This is something that I think, I've spoken to LSIs and ESIs in the past, and when it comes to the open mind, they like to think of themselves as open-minded. But they're not open-minded. They're not open-minded people, really. It's not that they can't accept other possibilities, or they can't, or they can't look at different perspectives. But to this type, there's really the perspective. That's a good way to think about it. That process of taking that SI, converting into SC down to NI, that relationship between those elements, from the demonstrative to the creative to the mobilizing, it's a narrowing. They're filtering all that sensoric data, and they're narrowing into one perspective. And so to them, there's effectively the perspective. And it's not that they can't accept alternative viewpoints. It's just that it's not going to come naturally to them. You might have to find a way to bring it to them. So I recall that one time with an ESI friend, I was like outside flying my drone, and he was driving his car. I thought he might be like pulling up to the house, because it's around the time that he would show up. And so I was flying my drone, and I was thinking about like, if he's pulling up, I might like chase him in the car, right? But then I was like, maybe he wouldn't like that. So he can be weird about stuff like that. But later I had mentioned it to him, and he was like, why would you do that? Like, he was like really bothered by it for some reason. And then I said, well, with other people, like I probably wouldn't have. And I was like, but because it's you and you know what my drone looks like, then I didn't think it would be a problem. And he seemed really unsettled by it. And then I don't remember how I explained it, but I described it in a different way. And he was like, I see what you're saying. Like, it's almost like for a moment there, like he locked into what he thought was weird about it, what he didn't like about it. And it took me, stating it in a couple different ways to get him to see that, instead of just chasing him with my drone, it was like he would have known, he would have seen that it was my drone, he would have recognized that, I wasn't like some creep or some stranger. It was almost like there was some missing information that he didn't have, that I had to sort of figure out what it was and provide it for him not to have a snap judgment. So that's sort of the thing, right? These types are going to have snap judgments. And so you can get past them. It's not that they are totally closed-minded. It's just that you have to find the perspective that's going to get them to see it differently, and it's not always easy. So, generally they're not producing that sense of perspective. They have polar NE. They're not, or vulnerable NE. They're not developing a bunch of different alternatives as to what something is. They're likely to always sort of focus on one alternative, and then every now and then they may realize that there's another side to it. But generally, that's going to come last. So they're more likely to be reactive or to feel a certain way about things until proven otherwise. This is also why that LIE can be so useful, because not only are they impartial in comparison to the ESI, which can sort of ground them in that like logic or rationale. But the LIE is always producing extrovert intuition, and so they can see so much perspective, and then they have that most likely perspective, right? They're going to funnel it into NI, and so this is going to be very grounding for the ESIs, because they're going to have someone who can pull on all the different perspectives and go, oh, well, it could be this or it could be that, but not overload them with options, because ultimately their focus is on narrowing into that, into NI. And so they're going to be able to provide, keep the ESI logical and objective, and at the same time sort of steer them in the right direction in terms of how they're taking things and the perspective they're having on things, right? So that's what that LIE is giving them. And then we've got TI. So this type is not incapable of using introverted logic. It's not like an IEE or an SCE that is going to struggle to be consistent. They're more likely to lean on TI as a breakdown or rationale of things. And in fact, I've often seen that when they're pushed on how they feel about things, like if I'm like, well, okay, but like, if I'm talking to an ESI and I see that they're talking about how they feel about it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it is. When I push them on that, they'll sort of open up and break down the situation in a rational format, so as to neutralize the personal tone, right? And so you can kind of see that if how they feel about something is not being received or taken as is, they will default and use that two-dimensional TI to sort of provide a rational view of what they're talking about. And I've also noticed in general, with IEEs and SEEs, they often struggle to understand things like socionics because of all of the TI that's involved in this topic. And ESIs are going to have a lot easier time receiving that kind of thing. If you talk to them conceptually, or if you talk to them about things like this, it's going to be a little bit easier. However, frankly, this is not a very intuitive type. They have polar NE and they have mobilizing NI, so they're gonna have some intuition, but it's not going to be super expansive or exploratory. It's going to be very narrow. So you're going to see a very grounded person. You're not going to see a lot of abstract meandering. Probably another reason we don't see a whole lot of ESIs in this community, or at least heavily invested in typology. I think a lot of them are here for the people. So yeah, I think that is a good summary or breakdown of the ESI, and I hope that was helpful. Before you go, give me a like. Comment down below what you think. The likes really help. Also, we have a Discord server, so you can join and come and talk if you'd like to. We've got a pretty good, solid community, and I'm on there as well, so you can tag me and say hi. Also, I have type diagnostic sessions. Generally, session I have it in the link in the bio. You can see the prices. But I have actually lowered the price for YouTube sessions because I was getting a lot of private sessions, but I want to provide material for you guys. So if you'd like to get typed, I did reduce the prices on YouTube sessions so that we can go ahead and get some videos done. So keep that in mind as an option. And if you know any ESIs, go ahead and send them this video and ask them what they think about this description. So, all right, I think that's all. So thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.